Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Remotely Speaking Up. And this is actually our final individual expert episode of season one. And we're very honored to have with us for this episode Mr. Ron Johnson, who is the founder of Blueprint Creative, which is an award-winning branding company. And on top of that, Ron is a bit of a thought leader as well in the branding and HR space, which he'll tell us a bit more about during our podcast. But this particular session or this particular episode is really focused on how we can build our personal brand online. So Ron is very good in this area and he's helped a lot of people in this area, including myself. So I'll turn over to Ron to tell us a bit more about himself, how he got into this area. And then from there, we'll go on to actually speak about how do you build your personal brand online if you were, let's say, new to consulting, if you maybe lost your job or quit your job and now want to have explore online opportunities or want to move your business into the digital space. Ron is going to tell us how we can really stand out. So thanks so much for joining us, Ron. And
thanks for having me. Okay, so I'm going to give you a kind of a crash course about myself. My name is Ron Johnson. I'm from Barbados. I am, yes, sunny Barbados.
I'm slightly biased, carry on.
Yeah, you would be. And I did spend 6 years in Trinidad and Tobago. I'll explain that in a bit. I am in the branding industry, and my path to get into the branding industry is probably a little bit unorthodox. So I actually spent 6 years in Trinidad studying biology, 4 years in Trinidad studying biology. And just about 3 months before I graduated, I realized I don't particularly like biology. And immediately after that, I did an MBA program. The first time I've ever done a business course in my life. I didn't do it at undergrad. I didn't do it in secondary school. First time doing any business course in my entire life. And I took to it like a fish to water. I really focused and enjoyed the aspects of marketing. Came back to Barbados, worked in the print industry. And then in 2008, I had the opportunity with two other co-founders to start Blueprint Creative, which is a creative agency. When we really started from a design background. Anything that could be designed, from ad campaigns, social media, corporate documents, annual reports, brochures, PDF kits, you name it, we did it. And over time, we recognized that there was a little bit of a vacuum in the market in terms of holistic branding. So most CEOs, entrepreneurs, business owners in Barbados are very familiar with things like advertising campaigns, marketing campaigns, but we realized a lot of people really weren't comfortable or familiar with branding an organization from the inside out. So we started looking at the market and we realized that a lot of companies were saying, hey, talk to our marketing department or our ad agency. We need more clients. Let's do a campaign. So the marketing department or the ad agency would dutifully go out and do a campaign. The campaign would bring new customers through the door. The new customers that came through the door will receive poor customer service from disengaged employees, not spend as much as if they would have if they had gotten good service, and walk back through the door. The CEO or the company would say, hey, we need more customers, talk to our marketing department or ad agency. And that same spiral would go on and on and on. And we realized that if you're going to build a strong brand, you don't only need great design, of course that's important, but you also need to have a very strong company culture where our team members are engaged and excited about helping the company to grow. So because of that, we started to suggest to our clients diplomatically, in addition to doing these ad campaigns, why not focus on your company culture, employee engagement, get HR involved in the process? And it got to the point you realize that this is something that needed to be addressed. So we went from diplomatically suggesting it to including it in our services in terms of let's look at your brand from a holistic perspective, 360 degree look at it. And that led us to realize that branding professionals need to work with HR professionals. So out of that, we developed a brand new business framework for branding.
Yeah.
And we call it wait for it,
Mhm.
branding. But we spell it BHRanding. Basically, it's integrating HR into the branding framework, uh, because modern companies are understanding that if you want to build a strong brand, that you have to build it from the inside. So in other words, brands are built from the inside. And if brands are built on the inside, it stands to reason that HR professionals, the individuals who are most likely to be tasked with things like company culture, employee engagement, etc., they
Yeah.
should be considered to be part of your branding team. And
That's,
that's how we got there. And we call it the branding equation.
that's fascinating. I like the I like the idea that branding is usually considered as a sort of external facing
Right.
endeavor, but very similar to employer branding, you're focusing on the internal transformation, but
Yeah.
doing that from the marketing side and pulling HR in rather than HR focusing on the employer branding just from a recruitment point of view as well.
Right.
So that's really interesting. And I noticed because you've been consulting with organizations on how they can do that, but
Yeah.
also you've delivered a lot of workshops and so forth on how persons who are their own organization can develop their own personal brand to attract their clients as well. So what has
Right.
that process been like?
Okay. So the
Or
first time,
ask you actually, I'm going to take a step back. Sorry to interrupt you, Ron,
sure.
but how would you describe your personal brand?
Okay. So my personal brand, first of all, I'm an introvert, which is
Yeah,
an interesting character trait for some person who's in marketing.
yeah,
I think I got thrust into different areas of branding, despite being an introvert. So definitely, I'm an introvert for sure. I'm a little bit corny. Very, my humor is very dry. I love corny jokes and puns, but my family, friends, and workmates don't appreciate my corny humor, my puns. So they've banned me from doing that anymore. So in other words, you can say that I'm on punishment.
oh dear.
Yeah, I know. It's really bad. Well, you started it. You asked me what my brand was like.
Poor
Um,
audience, I apologize. Either I
oh,
apologize or you're welcome.
you just opened a whole can of worms there.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, but my brand, I've been invited to do a lot of workshops in different
yeah,
countries, and in terms of my brand as a business professional,
mm,
uh, I like to make people think. I like I like it when I'm doing a workshop or doing a presentation or talking to a customer, and all of a sudden they stop, and it's kind of like I never saw it that way before,
yeah.
right? So yeah, that's pretty much. I'm very in terms of my brand. I'm very passionate. I'm very intense, and I have been accused of being too intense, even while I'm talking in workshops, because I think very deeply, and then my mind goes into that zone. So I remember doing a workshop once. The workshop was called "Why You Should Encourage the F Word in the Workplace."
Yeah.
And the F word in this case was fun, not the other F word. And people came up to me afterwards. They're like, your messaging was great. I do agree that we should have fun in the workplace. And then two or three of them came to me and said, "But you don't seem like a very fun person." And this was right after my workshop on fun, right? Because my face was straight and everything. And so I decided to play along with that character. I looked at them with a blank face. And I
Kind of like
said,
irony of it. Yeah, I like that.
yeah, yeah. I said, I looked at them and said, with a straight face, I'm laughing on the inside, just to play them. But since then, I've learned how to be a little bit more kind of inviting,
Yeah,
because when I get in that thought zone, I tend to veer off and I'm thinking.
yeah.
So I like to tell people that I have a medical condition.
Mhm.
It's called RBF,
Oh dear.
resting bitch face.
Oh yeah, we're familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, so if you were asking about a brand, definitely introvert, but at the same time, dry humor, intense, and I like to make people really think hard about what they're doing.
okay, that's really good. How would you, because that's something that you've honed over time through your
Yeah,
experience, I guess, from delivering online webinars and so forth.
yeah,
Um, how would you advise a person who, let's say, is now getting into the space? They want to jump online, but they feel, let's say, overwhelmed because there's so many people online talking already. There's so many content. They don't know where to begin. They think they have a service that's valuable or a product that's valuable, but they don't know where to start making their voice heard or standing out in that online space or crowd. What would you suggest to a person like that? Where can they actually, or how do they go about developing their personal brand?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of quick fire recommendations. There is a quote that I love that says, be yourself, everyone else is taken.
Yeah.
First thing is that you need, and this has become a cliche, unfortunately, but this whole thing of be authentic, but it's been around so long and it will continue because it's true. You need to be authentic, you need to be yourself.
Yeah.
I remember one of the best pieces of advice I got in presentation and workshops came from my sister, Renee, who's also my business partner. I had done a workshop one year and I wasn't really happy with my performance. And for some strange reason, they invited me back the next year. I was like, really? You really want me back after what happened last year? Because I didn't think it was anything special. My sister Renee said, you need to stop trying to present and you need to just have a conversation with people. Because the previous year, I was presenting in a way that I thought people should present with the hand movements and all of this. And, it just wasn't me. I went in that second year, I started to have a conversation with the audience. And all of a sudden people started taking notes. They started that look on their face that I love in terms of, I never thought about that way. And I kind of developed my stride by presenting, but not by presenting, if you get what I'm coming from. Exactly. Just having a conversation with people. The other thing,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying. You go ahead.
Okay. No, I was saying that I really agree with that because I always go back to when I was probably in college, anywhere between 16 to 18. I used to go to job interviews, and I always tried to present myself as what I thought they wanted or what a professional was. Like this very stiff person in a three-piece suit that didn't make any jokes, answered all their questions and very formal. And I never got called back. But as soon as I started presenting who I was and just talking to them like they were human beings and people, then I saw the switch. I started getting a lot of callbacks. So what you're saying in terms of that authenticity and presenting your real self, as you said, is really important.
Right. Another quick fire tip I would say is that you have to find an area that has a high level of differentiation. You asked in your question, how do people stand out? And interestingly enough, the number one book that I would recommend for people to read if they want to stand out is called Stand Out by Dory Clark. Go on Amazon, look for Stand Out with Dory Clark. Brilliant book. In today's world, you have to bring something with differentiation. You can't be, you can be one of many, but if you really want to stand out, you have to differentiate your product. So for instance, Rochelle, you did an excellent job of developing the gig HR framework, and that sets you apart from other HR professionals. And the gig HR framework was developed before coronavirus. So you couldn't have predicted the pandemic, but you looked further ahead and saw that in the future, you do think that companies are going to have some HR challenges with contract workers, gig workers, etc., digital nomads. So that's a perfect example of differentiation. And when people are looking for an HR professional that can help them with gig contracts, obviously they're going to look towards you because you have developed your brand in something that is differentiated from what other people are offering.
Yeah, but in a wider discipline, a wider space. So
exactly.
I guess that can often be difficult with persons. A lot of persons find themselves feeling like they're swimming in a very large ocean and not quite sure where to start that differentiation. I know for myself, it started really with research and collaboration and mentoring, those sort of things, speaking to very wise people in addition to yourself. So what would you say to someone who is trying to find their sort of niche in order to differentiate? How do you go about doing that?
I think that one of the foundational elements of developing your own niche is to have a mastery of something that you are passionate about. So for instance, I was and still am passionate about conventional branding. to the point where he saw the weaknesses of building a brand based on advertising, marketing, social media, PR. So
Yeah.
I love branding so much that I saw there's this huge vacuum that wasn't being attended to.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, why can't we fill this vacuum in the market? And that's how we developed the branding equation, which is
Yeah.
branding, BRanding, plus HR equals branding,
Yeah.
BHRanding.
Yeah.
We would not have been able to develop that brand new framework unless we understood conventional branding to the point where we realized that there's a vacuum in the market.
Mm.
Similarly, I don't think you would be able to come up with the gig HR concept unless you were so steeped in HR that you realized this is a trend that's going to be important moving forward. And you also talked earlier about swimming this large ocean. A great concept or book for you to read, for anyone to read, is called Blue Ocean Strategy, and the follow-up book is Blue Ocean's Shift. I don't know if you're familiar with that framework, but the authors have proposed that there are two oceans. The first ocean is red because it's filled with competitors.
Yeah.
It's filled with blood of competitors because everyone's trying to fight for the same market.
Yeah.
But the authors say there's also a second ocean called the blue ocean, where it's blue because there's no blood in the water, because you are a category of one. You're not fighting against the competition.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that you talked about Stand Out, and that's my first book to recommend, Stand Out with Dory Clark. And you talked about the oceans, and the second book I was going to recommend was actually Blue Ocean Strategy and Blue Ocean Shift.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
It's
know.
like you're reading my mind.
This tingling. We got a spidey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great minds, I like to think.
Yes.
That's really good. Can you think of some examples of some brands that you really see as that's really sort of perfected that messaging? Or actually, I'll take it to the micro level, not just big brands, but can you think of some individuals? I know you use the example of the BHR framework. Thank you for that, by the way. But can you think of like some other individuals who really stand out in the way they brand themselves personally and what you've learned from them? Or why you do? Yeah.
So for me, I tend to I get a lot of inspiration from books, videos, listening to people's experience. Yeah. And I wanted to just point out something on a macro scale first before I possibly drill down. Yeah. If you take a look at standing out, if you take a look at Gary Vee, who is a very big name in entrepreneurial circles, he has his own way of talking to people, a lot of colorful language. Sir Richard Branson also helps entrepreneurs think and develop their brands, but they do so in different ways. If Sir Richard Branson was supposed to now take on Gary Vee's personality and start using colorful language, people would say, what's going on? And similarly, if Gary Vee started toning down his language, people would say, what's wrong with you? Something is wrong. I bring that up to say that on an individual level, you really have to focus on just doing you, whether doing you means being adventurous and doing crazy stunts like Richard Branson has done his entire life, or being like Gary Vee and just busting a cuss word. If that's you, that's you. You know what I mean? I don't think he's lost any momentum in the market because he's being him. Another person that you can look at in terms of distinctiveness is Dave Chappelle. Now, Dave Chappelle, in my opinion, is one of the most brilliant comedians on the planet. And there's no one that does it the way that he does it, because he integrates social issues, political issues. He's a great storyteller. And I've heard other comedians talk about Dave Chappelle. And one comedian said, there's us in terms of comedians, and then there's Dave Chappelle up there, like on top of everything. And, Dave Chappelle had to take a walk away from his organization, his brand 2 years ago. He was off the scene for a long time, and then all of a sudden he came back. In my opinion, very, very distinctive in his delivery. So I just point out that it's in terms of your personal brand from a wide range. You're gonna get inspiration from a wide range of individuals. If you take a look at Sarah Blakely, one of my favorite entrepreneurs, I love her and what she stands for because of her approach to failure. So when she was a kid, when she came home from school, her dad would ask her, Sarah, what have you failed at today? And she said, well, I tried out for the cheerleading team and I failed. she'd get a high five from her dad. But if a week passed and she hadn't failed at anything, her dad was actually disappointed because he knew that if you're not failing at something, you're not trying enough big things. And that's what led her to become a self-made billionaire.
Wow.
So yeah, so I'm trying to just say, look, in terms of inspiration, it's not only about a particular model. It's about seeing how other people build their own personal brand, sometimes by accident, you know, but by being distinctive. I just finished writing my first book, and it is coming out in a few weeks. It's called Tighten Your Shoelaces. And it is full of great examples of how people can tighten their shoelaces and build a stronger brand.
Yeah.
But it's also full of corny puns. And
it's
naturally, you know,
yeah.
I'm kind of non-apologetic about it. You know, that's simply my way of communicating. So I gave someone an advanced copy of the book, and they said, you need to put in the acknowledgements or in introduction a little warning to people to expect the most corny puns you can ever come across, and that's, you know, it's perfectly fine. Yeah.
And I think when you do that as well, people start to look for them as well as they go along, which keeps them engaged. And you're right, it really does make you, it brands you in that way, not only for your expertise, but this is what makes Ron different. And I've had a sneak peek at your book as well, and it is brilliant. So I'm looking forward
thank you.
to seeing it on the shelves.
I really appreciate that.
Or in the digital spaces. Yeah.
Yes. I think a couple of things too I want to point out in terms of building your brand. I think one of the biggest challenges I find is that people have a fear of failure. Yeah. And they don't want to start anything, because starting something means that you have the possibility of failing. If it stays in your head and it's just this idea, people, well, they feel safe not starting it because it means that they haven't failed. But you have to go there, you have to fail. So a few years ago, I was in the British Virgin Islands, and I was there on a business trip. And my colleague and I went over to an island called Virgin Gorda. It's a beautiful place called the Baths. You've been there? Yes. It is fantastic. So for those of you who may not know, Virgin Gorda is an island off of Tortola. There are these huge boulders. There are these really interesting caves. There's like waist-high crystal water. And, you know, I was enjoying the expedition with my colleague. And we finally got to the end of the caves, and there's a sign saying exit, and it pointed to the right side. But there were hundreds of people there that day, I guess from cruise ships and airlines. And the cavern was so small that you had to wait for 15 minutes for your turn, because people could only go through single file. So after about 2 or 3 minutes, you know, I don't have much patience. I looked on the left, and there was this cavern that no one was going through. So I told my colleague, let's call her Jane. I said, Jane, let's go explore this over here. She said, Ron, please just let's not do this time, because I'm known for wandering off on my own. I said, come on. She said, no, I'm not going. I'm staying here. I said, well, it's your loss. I walked off into the cavern, and it was the most beautiful scene within that context. And I'm walking now, and I am stepping carefully, but I make a little mistake. I stubbed my toe. I didn't think much about it. Went back, finished exploring it. I told Jane, you know, you really miss this beautiful sight. And after 2 or 3 minutes, I said, Jane, I raised up my toe really hard because this is hurting like hell. So we finally get to like water's a little bit more shallow. I looked up my left foot, and my pinky toe is jutting out at a 45-degree angle. Yes. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen in the movies where people like pop their arm back in place. And
just stop it now.
So I'm trying to pop my toe back in place, and it's popping out. The long and short of the story is that I broke my toe because I was exploring someplace off the beaten track, you know. And Jane didn't waste any time in describing in detail how I broke my toe in our company WhatsApp group. So within 20 seconds of getting back to Wi-Fi, I had like people just saying, are you okay? You know, some of them had empathy. Some of them had no empathy for me because they know I tend to walk off my own.
Told you so.
And yeah, exactly. So after that, you know, I got some good natured ribbon, It was a little bit embarrassing. But you know what?
Mm.
If you had asked me beforehand and said, if you told me, if you go down in this cavern, you're going to break your toe, I would not have gone,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
But having gone and having broken my toe, I don't feel any regret from going because I got to see a place that other people hadn't seen. And every day broke my toe. It's not like it broke my leg or my life or anything like that.
Mm.
But in the theater industry, people always say, hey, go break a leg. When they
Mm.
say break a leg, they do mean that, meaning go up there and have a great time or do your best. So I would encourage entrepreneurs, as weird as this sounds, to go out there and break a toe.
Yes.
You know, go out there and try things. You are going to fail. You are going to fail in terms of your personal brand, but don't let the fear of a broken toe stop you from exploring a beautiful place and having these great experiences that you would not have if you had stayed put.
Yeah, and it really is a process as well. It's a process of experimentation, as you said, trying new things and experimenting. Maybe you try to carve your own brand, you find maybe it doesn't resonate. So now you
Yeah,
have information and feedback that you can go back now and think, okay, what is it that is not appealing? What is it that is appealing? And how do I
right.
then start to shift my brand? So it's almost,
Yeah,
I remember I wrote a paper once and it was in a workshop and I got very heavy criticism on it. And I was like,
mhm.
oh, well, it's good to know that it was trashed before I presented it. That's why I said
Right, right,
to the feedback, the person's giving the feedback. And they said, no, 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 no. They said they can actually, and these were experts that I really look up to, international experts.
right,
And they said, Rochelle, we can cover our walls with the letters, all the rejection letters we've gotten over our careers. And they said
right,
they've gotten to the point that they see them as prototypes. So when you write your first draft or you try your first thing, see that as
right,
prototype one. You get
right,
that, you try it, you learn, then you develop prototype two, more feedback. Maybe it's still rejected, but you have additional comments, it's less criticism. And through that, you finally get to what becomes your niche or what becomes your final brand. So I think that is so important what you're saying, just putting yourself out there, having that courage to just try and hone your brand and be willing to let it evolve as well.
yeah. There's a great quote that says, if you can't look back at your first attempt with embarrassment, you've waited too long to bring it to market.
Yeah.
You at some point, like I look back, I love writing, but I look back at some of the pieces I've done 2 years
Yeah.
ago, and I was like, what? I wrote this crap. I was really impressed and passionate about it when I wrote it, but I'm like, this
Yeah.
is not good. And the other thing though is that you're gonna have to get accustomed. Your story is brilliant because you have to get accustomed to people criticizing you. So I remember I put out an article about 2 or 3 years ago on LinkedIn. I was really happy about it. It was about branding professionals. And this guy, I'm gonna quote him word for word. Under the article that I was so proud of, this guy wrote that so-called branding agencies or experts are basically advertising agencies in sheep's clothing that are trying to get their sticky little paws on more of the corporate spend.
Wow. He felt
I
about it.
Yeah, I was in shock because I never expected, that kind of
Yeah.
backlash, but you have to get accustomed to it. Another article that I wrote while building my brand, it was about how you shouldn't rely exclusively on advertising to build your brand. And an advertising professional from another Caribbean island wrote me and said, how dare you try to eviscerate the advertising industry?
Wow.
I was like, I'm not trying to eviscerate anything. We do advertising as well, but the truth is, our philosophy is that you can't use advertising alone to build your brand. So you have to get accustomed. As you put new ideas out there, people are going to disagree with you, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, that is very true. I think I've heard a lot of sayings around the importance of letting your voice be heard. And one of the things I often admired, because it was something when I first started business that I feared myself of being criticized.
Right.
And I remember someone said to me once, you know what? One, the criticism is valuable to you, but at the end of the day, if you let criticism stop you from doing anything, then that is a great loss, because look around you, no one ever built a monument to a critic. I was like,
Yeah.
interesting. I always thought that was really interesting. And I
Yeah.
remember when I first started to put myself more in the public space,
Yeah.
especially talking about remote working pre-COVID, within the Caribbean context, I got the feedback on a popular radio show that this will never work in the Caribbean and I'm out of touch with the Caribbean context. And my sister heard it and she was quite outraged by it. And she's like, "Would you really said this?" And I said, "Who said that?" And she said, "This person." And I said, "What? They criticize me?" Yes, yes, that's amazing. I've made
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yep.
it really depends sometimes on, I think once you accept from the very beginning that that's going to be a part of it, that's going to be a part of putting yourself out there and building your brand,
Yeah.
then the journey becomes easier.
Yeah. Sometimes the more criticism you have, the more you're able to kind of refine your
Yeah,
framework or your thoughts.
yeah,
You were asking about, you know, having what advice to give people who are trying to build their brand online or otherwise. Curiosity.
yeah,
Curiosity is a huge asset. If you are curious about life and curious about things around you, um, you're probably going to get to a stage where you can differentiate yourself faster than if you're simply not curious. You know, you have to be looking under things. You have to try different things. You have you have to learn from your mistakes. You know, you have to find ways to differentiate yourself. And sometimes the way you differentiate yourself maybe silly. You know, you don't
yeah,
always have to be uh you know, this kind of starched person where,
yeah,
you know, as you said in your examples with your interviews, I started getting callbacks after you let your personality shine. So
yeah.
for me, I always, when I'm doing a workshop, I always walk around with this, which is Stars Hammer Mjolnir. And I carry it
Just
around
a
for two
random
reasons.
hammer that everyone keeps in their
Yeah,
purse.
exactly. So I carry it around for two reasons. The first is that the branding equation framework is meant to destroy the silos between marketing and HR. So I carry this around to say this is how we're going to dismantle it. And I also carry it around because only people who are worthy can lift Thor's hammer. So during
Yeah,
my workshops, I tend to pass it around. I let HR professionals hold it and I take pictures. And it's become like a little bit of talking point now. People are out, go out and they see me and they're like, where's Thor's hammer?
yeah,
I've carried this to me. I've carried this with me to USA, Mexico, as far away as Malaysia. And, you know, I
Ron,
take
I am
pictures with it.
terribly
Yeah.
offended. We have had lunch before and you did not bring your hammer. Clearly, I'm not worthy. We were gonna rectify this.
Oh, oh boy. No, we're gonna have to rectify this. Yeah.
Yes, please do.
But yeah, so I mean, for me, it is something fun like that because, like I said earlier, I tend to I tend to be a little bit dry sometimes in my presentation. So having this instantly kind of makes me more of an interesting person, at least like gonna ask like, "What's up with Hammer?" You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I didn't speak much about the experience going overseas though. Uh, so of course, I was born in Barbados. I spent some time in Trinidad,
yeah,
and what I've realized is that if you have a good idea, the world is a lot smaller than it used to be,
yeah,
with the internet, with social media, and for some person coming from a small island like Barbados to be invited to Mexico,
yeah,
to be invited to Malaysia, to be invited to the US, it does show that in today's world you don't necessarily have to be from a specific country to be taken seriously.
yeah,
It really doesn't matter. Like, what
yeah.
if you have a great idea, you're going to push it, you will get noticed.
That's it. I think one of the other important things about building your personal brand as well is consistency, making sure that the messages
Yes,
that you're putting out there is
yes,
in line with what you've put out there before. And I mean, your message can shift, but in terms of the regularity, let's say, for example, how often you're putting content out, what people come to
yeah.
expect of you and so forth. I think that's also pretty important.
So consistency is important, but also clarity is important.
Yeah.
So I remember when you first started the business, we got invited to a business networking event,
Yeah.
and someone came over and invited and introduced me to a potential client. And the potential client asked the most obvious question you know is going to happen. What is it you do? And I was ready for this question. I was like, oh, we do reports, we do logos, we do social media, we do advertising campaigns, we do marketing, we do brochures, we do. After about 5 seconds, I could have said, "Baba, black sheep, have you any wool?" And he wouldn't have noticed because he had already tuned out.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, no one cares what you do; they care what you can do for them.
Yeah.
You need to be very clear about what you're doing for people.
Yeah.
And we changed what we call our benefit statement. And if anyone asks us now, what do you do? We simply say we help companies build stronger brands and stronger businesses.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, what? No, I definitely want to hear about that because I want a stronger brand. How do you
Yeah.
do it? And then that's an invitation to say, to explain how you do something. But
Yeah.
people aren't looking for a laundry list of items you do. They want to hear in plain terms, in very clear terms, what makes you different.
How you can.
So when,
Yeah.
yeah. So if when we get invited to do any pitches for jobs or to send in our portfolio, and people ask, well, what makes Blueprint different? Our answer is very, very clear. You know, we help build brands from starting from the inside out because your brand is built from the inside out. And
Yeah.
we do have a track record of uh, this philosophy with our clients.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, I think for me, in terms of building your online brand, you have to do you, right?
Yeah.
Don't do someone else. You have to do you.
Yeah.
And then you have to be confident in your own skin, doing you, and not necessarily copying the style of someone else, you know? And with that confidence, you get more clarity. With that clarity, it feeds back into your confidence loop, you know? But the other thing I would say is in terms of building your personal brand and standing out, if you've ever read any of Jim Collins' books, Great by Choice, he talks about the hedgehog concept.
Yeah.
And anyone listen to this podcast, just Google hedgehog concept and you'll come across it. But it's basically three interlocking circles. And if I remember correctly, the three interlocking circles are what you're passionate about,
Yeah.
what you can excel at, and what drives your economic engine.
Yeah.
I'm just paraphrasing because there are some people that say I'm going to be. I could say to myself, "Hey, I'm going to be the next Bolt from Jamaica,"
Yeah.
but I'm not built for it, right?
Yeah.
I can't make money off of it. I may be passionate about it. So the question is, how do you find that sweet spot in the middle? And it's kind of difficult to explain when you're on a podcast, but if you are listening to this podcast, just Google hedgehog concept, Jim Collins, and read about it. And that should put you on a really good path in terms of what is it I can do that fills those three interlocking circles.
Yeah. Brilliant. Wow. I need to check this out. I've heard of something similar, but I haven't seen the Jim Collins version, but I've seen the a Venn diagram of what you're good
Yeah.
at, what you enjoy doing, and your experiences. It sounds very familiar, but I'm definitely
Yeah.
checking that out because I'm
No,
always
check it out. I would say that for anyone who is thinking about differentiating themselves, start with that hedgehog concept.
yeah,
Because if you're pursuing something that you are passionate about but you're not good at,
yeah,
your chances of standing out and being successful are very, very limited. You know what I mean? So passion is one end of it, but the question is, can you do this better than anyone else in the whole world
that's
or anyone else in your industry?
yeah,
Because if you're passionate about it but you're crappy at it, you're not going to stand out.
yeah. And it
And
shows.
if you're,
It shows when you're
yeah,
not passionate about it. It shows when you're just
oh,
going
for
through
sure.
emotions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I totally agree.
Sure.
Well, we have come to the end of our episode, Ron. So thank you so much. You have shared a lot with us. And I'm always grateful for our experts that come on because you give our audience so much to think about and you really give practical steps as to where we can actually get started. So thank you for sharing that with us. And tell us
Thank you for,
before you go, tell us about your travel story. Because I know you've been around the world pre-COVID. I know you
yeah.
were
Well,
quite a bit.
so there's a funny travel story that I have. It's funny now, but it wasn't funny then.
Oh,
I went to do a workshop in Orlando and a workshop in Miami. So I went to Orlando first. I did what I had to do in Orlando, made the presentations, and I'm flying back now to Miami to do a workshop the next day. And I get to the airport on time, I'm checking in, and they tell me, oh, well, your flight is canceled because of bad weather. And I'm supposed to be in Miami the next morning, 9 o'clock, to give a workshop.
Yeah.
And I was like in shock. I tried to switch airlines, didn't work. So I eventually had to call an Uber to drive me from Orlando to Miami. And every Uber driver that came, when I told them where I was going, they said, I'm not carrying you there at this time of night. Because apparently what happens is that the app doesn't show you the Uber drivers exactly where. They just say like 2+ hours.
Yeah.
And after about 3 Uber drivers showing up and saying, I'm not carrying to Miami.
Yeah.
And I asked why. This guy said, here's the reason. Because the trip is so long and there's no guarantee you're going to get a paying trip back from Miami to Orlando that no one's going to carry you there. So I said, all right, no problem. The next Uber that came, he asked me, where are you going? I didn't say anything. I put all of my bags in, I closed the door, and I said, I'm going to Miami. He said, I'm not carrying you there. I said, you're going to have to carry, because I'm not getting into this car. I have to be in Miami by a certain time. So we had this back and forth for about 5 minutes with him insisting he's not carrying me to Miami. I had to pull out like $100 or $200 and say, just carry me. And those are some of the real life experiences you have when you're doing remote working. Traveling trips and airlines that are changing schedule, things that you can't predict. I can laugh at it now, but believe me, I wasn't laughing at it.
I remember trying to submit proposals from airports, teaching a class from an airport because things just went terribly wrong. So you're absolutely right. You're very lucky they took you. I'm glad that you got there in the end. It does sound familiar. I think I spoke to you like the day before it happened or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it was haywire.
That's crazy. Well, thanks for joining us, Ron, and thanks for sharing again. And thank you again for our audience who constantly joins us. This has been
before you close up.
Yeah, sure.
What I want to say is thank you for putting on this podcast and this series, because the world is changing very, very rapidly. And what you're doing in terms of remote working and interviewing people that can add to the framework is brilliant. So on behalf of your listeners, I just wanted to thank you for putting in this hard work.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ron. It is a labor of love. Let's put it that way.
Right.
All right. So this has been episode 15 of Remotely Speaking. It is the final individual episode of season 1. And we're going to end season 1 with next week's expert panel discussion, which Ron hopefully will be joining us on again, along with some additional experts. So thank you for listening, and thank you for joining again. And this has been another episode of Remotely Speaking Up. Take care. Bye.